Live from the Geico Outkick studios. I hope all of you are having a fantastic Friday. I hope you remember what day it is. I hope you don't go full Tom Brady and forget what you're going to do today as you're driving into work, where 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com for a free rate quote. Not shocking that the Bucs lost. Shocking that they lost in such an undisciplined way and in such a ridiculous fashion, with Tom Brady forgetting the down and distance on the final play of the game and thinking he had one more play on the field. I mean, just utterly mind-blowing. I know 2020 has had a lot of crazy things happen in it, but I never would have anticipated that one of those things would be Tom Brady forgetting the down and distance on a 2-minute drive against Nick Foles and the Chicago Bears, when all he needed to do was put his team into field goal range and they would have had a solid chance to win this football game. And I'm not just saying that because I had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the money line as a part of a money line parlay for a bunch of different bets. I felt very good about the Bucs winning this game. And even having watched the whole thing, I don't know how they found a way to lose. I feel like they made so many mistakes and so many errors and left so many different plays on the field that this was as much of a Bucs loss as it was a Bears win. I think they will go back and watch all this film and say, man, how in the world did we find a way to lose this game? And Nick Foles, I mean, it seems like he just finds a way to get wins. And the last time we saw him against Tom Brady, he was a lot better than he was last night. But in both cases, Nick Foles can say he emerged the victor against Tom Brady, and there's not a lot of people who can say that. All right. We are breaking down all the college football and the NFL games all throughout Outkick today. Excited to do so. Can't wait to watch all the games and see all the insanity on Saturday and Sunday. So let's dive right into all of these games. I'm going to be kicking back, watching an awful lot of college football and the NFL as I do every single weekend. I am a football junkie. Dub is also a football junkie. So what we try to do at the start of the second hour of the program on Friday is give you our viewing guide, right? We each are going to pick a game and say, like, hey, this is my number one draft pick for the weekend, the game that I absolutely, positively cannot miss in both college football and the NFL, all right? And I will start it off this week. I let you start it off last week because you were excited to watch Auburn play against Georgia. And by the way, that was an unmitigated disaster for you because Auburn lost their 13th game against Georgia in the last 16, and so this is just a mess in general. So that was a. Do you want to apologize to America for telling them to watch the Auburn Georgia game?
Yeah, I do, and I just want to say I hope the same thing doesn't happen to your beloved Volunteers this weekend, because we may be cursing our own teams by doing this. So if that happens again, if Tennessee can't score a touchdown this week, we may have to just cross off Tennessee and Auburn for the rest of eternity on these game draft picks.
Or not go draft them when they're going to Athens, because that's what's going on. Georgia back at home for my number one draft pick. I told you yesterday this was my blood bank guarantee, my favorite gambling pick. I love Tennessee to cover here. I think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to be a fascinating battle. Let me break down why I think Tennessee-Georgia is going to be the best game of the weekend in college football, in my opinion, right? So Tennessee has a really good offensive line. They now have what I would call the hay in the barn starting to stack up with Jeremy Pruitt, right? The reason why Phil Fulmer hired Jeremy Pruitt is he saw in Jeremy Pruitt a coach like him, a guy who believes that games are won on the line of scrimmage, that you got to have the horses on the offensive and defensive lines of scrimmage in order to win. And Tennessee's not there yet, like they were back in the late 90s and the early 2000s when Phil Fulmer really had Tennessee rolling. They were winning championships. They were contending top 10 perennial team. But they're getting closer. And I believe with two good running backs in Ty Chandler and in Eric Gray, that Tennessee is going to be able to make plays in the running game. The offensive line is going to be able to lean on Georgia's defensive front, which is really, really good. Points are going to be at a premium in this game. And ultimately, it's going to come down to whose quarterback makes a play late to win this game. So I think it's going to be close. And I have no idea whether there's any reason to have confidence whatsoever in Jarrett Guarantano, the quarterback for Tennessee, who is a fifth-year senior and should be really, by this point, consistent, but has not yet proven that he can be consistent as a quarterback. What I've said earlier about the challenge of a guy like Guarantano is he can have his A-level game, but he can still have an F-level game. And when you get to be a fifth-year quarterback, that's way too much variety in terms of your overall performance. So, what kind of road warrior can he be against Georgia? And can Tennessee make Stetson Bennett beat them, right? Georgia is elite on the defensive side of the ball. They have a lot of talent across the board. Maybe, arguably, if you just look at recruiting class rankings, Georgia's almost the most talented team in college football right now. Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, I would say those are the three most talented teams in college football right now. But Georgia isn't elite at the quarterback position. And so, after all of the time that they've had to develop, they now are starting a former walk-on who's a little bit undersized, but has looked decent for them at the quarterback position in Stetson Bennett. I don't know what he's going to be capable of in this game, but I think it's going to come down to fourth quarter. He's going to have to make a play, or Jarrett Guarantano is going to have to make a play. I like Tennessee to cover this game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Going to be a physical, old-school Southeastern Conference battle without a lot of points posted by either team. So I like Tennessee as the best draft pick here for college football. What college football game would you draft up?
I'm going to head on over to the ACC and the big marquee matchup between Miami and Clemson. Now, Miami, they're kind of like the sexy new toy this year in college football. They got a new quarterback, transferred Derek King, coming over from Houston. And Rhett Lashley, a former Gus Malzahn protege, if you will, is calling plays for Miami. And this offense has been absolutely rolling so far this year. They're averaging 267 pass yards per game, and they're coupling that with 232 yards a game on the ground. So they've really got a balanced attack. Derek King, if you haven't watched him, this kid is electric. I mean, he is absolutely fantastic. He's an incredible athlete, running the ball and passing the ball. Clemson, we all know about Clemson, and they kind of remind me, honestly. We talked about the Kansas City Chiefs earlier this week about how they kind of play up or down to their competition. Clemson kind of gives me that same vibe because last week they played Virginia. They won, by a decent margin, 41-23, but if they were really up for that game, I feel like they should have won that game by 30 points plus. But now they get their first real test of the season, and they're only going to get a couple of these real tests all year being in the ACC. They've got Miami on Saturday, and then they got Notre Dame later on in the season. So is Clemson, the big question for me is Clemson going to really show up and show out in this game? The spread on this game is around 2 touchdowns.
Yep, similar to the Georgia-Tennessee game.
Absolutely, and they definitely have not played a team with the talent that Miami has, and they won't for a while, like I just mentioned. Will Clemson be able to get up and put it on this Miami team, or is Miami really a serious contender for the ACC title? Because this is a game, if Miami wins this game, I mean, they've got to almost be the favorite to win the ACC, at least get to the championship game and potentially represent the conference in the playoff. I have my doubts. I still think Clemson probably wins this game at home. But Derek King, like I mentioned, is a fantastic athlete, and he's one of those guys that can almost single-handedly win a team a game with his ability to run the ball and escape pressure, which I'm sure he'll be feeling from the Clemson front seven.
All right, so there are college football games of the week picks. I'll let you go first in the NFL. What's your must-watch NFL game this weekend, Dub?
This sounds odd to say, but this game involves the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are 3-1, and they're taking on the Indianapolis Colts, who laid a dud in week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, looking back on it, seems impossible based on the way they've been playing in recent weeks. The Colts statistically have the best defense in the league, taking on the Browns, who are absolutely running the ball down people's throats. They're not even letting Baker Mayfield ruin things for them. So I think it's an interesting matchup from that perspective. Can the Browns keep the offensive role going on the ground, sprinkling in through the air? And how about the play calling last week against Dallas. They were running reverses left and right. Jarvis Landry throwing bombs to Odell Beckham Jr. I'm curious to see if that sort of style continues against this Colts defense because they might need it to get some yards against Indianapolis. But, yeah, that's my game of the week in the NFL, Colts at Browns.
I agree with you. I think this is going to be – I never would have believed Colts-Browns would be a game that I'm like, oh, man, I really want to watch this. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's also early tease for the final hour of the show and the final segment of the show this week. We are going to be giving you a gambling pick in that game, and also in the game that I am drafting as my pick right now, which is the Battle of Pennsylvania. I am fascinated to see how the Eagles will continue, still rife with injury, coming off of a huge road win against the San Francisco 49ers that has them in first place in the woeful NFC East. The Eagles are 1-2-1, and the Steelers are 3-0. They got an early bye week because they were supposed to play against the Titans, weren't able to play there. And so now the Steelers at home get the Eagles coming to play against them. And I just think this is going to be a really, really interesting battle, right? Because Carson Wentz was atrocious in the first 3 weeks of the season. He started to show a little bit of progression in week 4. Can he continue it? And what do we know exactly about this Steelers team so far? We know that the Eagles have been tough to watch if you are an Eagles fan. But the Steelers, when you actually break down, I know they're undefeated, but when you actually break down the teams that they have beaten, they haven't really beaten any teams that are very good. The Giants haven't won a single game, all right? Steelers beat them. The Broncos have won one game, and it was against the Jets. Steelers beat them. And the Texans have not won a game yet either. So if you look at this Steelers team and say, okay, they're 3-0, but the teams that they have beaten, and live math is always a challenge here, but I believe I am correct that the teams the Steelers have beaten are combined 1-11 on the season. Only one victory, and that was the Broncos over the Jets, who are another 0-4 team. So the Steelers really haven't been tested at all. I think the Eagles is a step up in class. I think the Battle of Pennsylvania should be an interesting game to watch, and that is why I am drafting that one as my top NFL draft pick. All right, so there is our viewer guide for college football and the NFL, the two games that Dub and I think are the best in college and the two games that we think are the best in the NFL. Let me tell you this. As we get ready to go to break here, we are going to be joined by Ryan Glasspiegel, who is one of the writers for Outkick, and he had a pretty big story that he broke on Wednesday. Wednesday it was. He broke the story late Wednesday afternoon that ESPN is going to be laying off hundreds of employees in the near future. And that is a really fascinating and unfortunate story. I never want anybody to lose their job, but particularly in this COVID era when so many different people have been losing their jobs. But this is emblematic of a larger issue that ESPN is facing in their business that every sports network is facing, which is the overall ratings have collapsed for the NBA Finals. They've lost hundreds of millions of dollars off what they expected to make from those games based on very limited audiences. And as a result, ESPN has wildly, I believe, overpaid for very many different sports packages on television, and they haven't been able to make the money that they anticipated. And as a result, there's a great deal, frankly, of nervousness inside of ESPN and inside of Disney about the direction of this company. And so we're going to talk about that with Ryan Glasspiegel. I think you guys will enjoy it, and it should be an interesting examination of what is going on in the world of sports, particularly in business, but at ESPN in particular. And by the way, ESPN going super woke, that hasn't helped things either. Going all in on embracing left-wing politics instead of covering sports has also hurt them in a big way. It's helped us. Our audience is growing. Theirs is falling. We'll talk about that with Ryan Glasspiegel next. This is Outkick the Coverage on Fox Sports Radio.